I want to introduce our speaker here this morning. Glenn Dallman is the worship and family minister over at East Hill Church of Christ, right across the street here. I've known Glenn for several years now. He's a great guy for being a Vikings fan. I know that. His wife is an alum, and he should have been, but he went somewhere else. But Glenn is one of those guys that really loves people. And for me personally, he's a real encouragement in my life and a great friend. And so I want to introduce to you this morning Mr. Glenn Dallman.
Happy Valentine's Day. My topic today is marriage, but I don't want the guys to run out the door. We're not going to get serious about that today. Today is a day of romance, right? Not necessarily marriage. One of my opportunities in being a minister is performing weddings. My first wedding that I performed was about 20 years ago, and it was for my brother. It was a hot, humid August day, small country church on the edge of town, a church building that only seats about 75 people, no air conditioning, a single ceiling fan twirling up above us. And the time had finally come for the ceremony to start, so I walk up and I get on the stage, and the music starts, and then my brother, he walks down that aisle, that long walk, short walk, but for him a long walk that was going to change his life forever. And he takes his place beside me. And the music continues, and now the wedding party starts to proceed in time with the music. First, the groomsmen and the bridesmaids, and there's three couples, and they all come, and you can feel the climax of the moment building, and the music fades, and now the bridal song begins. And his bride turns the corner at the back of the auditorium. And as she appears, it's to us like the sunrise on a horizon. And I look at him, and his breath is just taken away. And instantly, his eyes start to mist up. And her eyes lock with his. And she, with her father by her side, walks down the aisle. And I ask the father, who gives his bride away? He says, me and my wife. And so she comes up to my brother's welcoming arms, and here they are, before me, before the church, before God. My brother and I love wilderness canoe camping. And so I began with a metaphor about how marriage is like two paddlers in a canoe. They have to work together if they're going to get to where they're going. If you have one person overpowering the other, you're going to get twisted in circles. If the person in the rear is dragging the paddle all the time, it slows their progress. The person in the front has to be looking for hazards that could potentially tip the boat. In order to get where they're going, they have to work together. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck in the middle of the lake. And marriage is like that. You get together with another person for a common purpose. I want to pause this story for a moment and ask you a very important question. When does marriage begin? Can we know the exact moment that this relationship between you and another changes forever? It's important because how you answer that question is going to reflect a lot on what you believe to be true and valid about this thing called marriage. Does marriage begin when you fall in love? I want an appropriate metaphor, falling, because for a lot of people it happens without you planning it. It's like tripping, only it's really enjoyable. And it's uncontrollable, and it accelerates as you fall, and at some point you catch yourself and you think, wow, I love this person. And finally the day comes, you and your love, you work up the courage and you confess to each other, I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my days with you. Oh, how delicious is romantic love. It makes the eyes shine, the face beam, the heart beat. But it's a feeling, it's an emotion. And like all feelings, no matter even the intense feeling of romantic love, it's going to come and it's going to go. And marriage is not meant to be something unstable like that. Does marriage begin when that couple first makes love? When they come together in that sweet moment of sexual union, is that the moment? And for others, all it is playing out a fantasy. Is marriage built on and sustained by sex? It's not. Yes, sex is important in marriage, but it is not going to sustain and stabilize and qualify as marriage. Does marriage begin at the point of engagement? April 17, 1998. I took my girlfriend at that time, who's now my wife. We went to the Elmo Park Conservatory and Arboretum in St. Paul, Minnesota. It is a mansion of glass windows filled with plants and trees and flowers from all over the world. It's stunning. There's ponds and there's paths and trails, and we would go there often just to walk the paths, and especially in the wintertime, it's warm in there. We talk, and so I had planned to propose to her at the Arboretum. And so with one hand, I'm holding her hand, and the other hand keeps involuntarily tapping the ring that's in my pocket. It's burning a hole in my pocket. I'm afraid it's going to drop out, I'm going to lose it. And so we're walking this path, and there comes a point when my mouth starts to dry up. My knees begin to shake, because I know around the bend, we're coming to the place where I intended to propose to her. And it was a nook outside of the main path that was draped over with bamboo trees and vines and littered with flowers everywhere, just as romantic as it can get. And so I direct her to the bench and fall to my knee, and I say, will you marry me? And she goes, no! Which meant to her, yes, but she was so surprised that I popped the question. And so began our time of engagement. Our jobs continued. The rest of the world continued as if nothing had happened. But something had definitely changed between us. We entered into this time of a promise to keep a promise. Is that marriage? A promise to keep a promise. Well, engagement, yes, in some ways we were closer than we had ever been, because now we're practicing and it's out. We're gonna do this thing. But in other ways, we were further apart than we'd ever been, because engagement is so surreal. It's the things that happen in that time of period is not married life. And by definition, it is supposed to end. Whereas a marriage is supposed to last. So I don't think engagement is the time when a marriage begins. Others might think that a marriage begins when two people move in together. And I'll adamantly defend that I do not believe that moving in together without wedding vows is wise, smart, safe as a way of test driving a marriage. It does just the opposite. Because when you move into this relationship and you say, I love her and I love him and we're gonna live together, we're gonna see if we're compatible, you put yourself in a position where you're trusting in the goodness of the other person when there's no obligation for them to be good or to do good. It's like starting a job without a contract that at any moment you could be kicked out the door, and yet you've invested all of yourself into this job, but there's no obligation to each other. And so moving in together, setting up housekeeping is not the beginning of marriage. When does a marriage begin? Can we fix the exact moment? Can we define the hour as saying, this is when it started? And I believe that we can. In Walter Wangeren's book, As for Me, My House, he says this: marriage begins when two people make the clear and unqualified promise to be faithful, each to the other until the end of their days. That spoken promise makes the difference. A new relationship is initiated that didn't exist before. Marriage begins when each vows to commit himself unto the other and to no other human in this world. With these words, I promise you my faithfulness until death parts us. Two people make a marriage by virtue of their vows. This vow to be faithful. And what do you think faithfulness means? Surely it's more than just saying, I'm going to be only committed to one sexual partner for the rest of my life. It means so much more than that. Faithfulness is your total commitment of yourself to another person. It is saying, I belong to you, and I receive your belonging to me. Faithfulness also is a timeless commitment. It has no qualifications on how long this marriage vow is going to last. There's no time key conditions like, yeah, I'm going to be married as long as the marriage works for me. Or I'll be married as long as this other person is faithful to me. Or I'll be faithful to you as long as I don't find something better. I do a lot of premarital counseling, and these kinds of attitudes, believe it or not, come up in premarital work. And they share, well, yeah, I want this to work out, but if it doesn't, I'm kind of hedging my bets here a little bit. And I have to press upon them. That is not a true marriage vow. Faithfulness. Faithfulness to care for. Faithfulness. Faithfulness to forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive. Faithfulness to be patient. Faithfulness to be kind. And I could just keep on going. Faithfulness. When I performed my first wedding, I was nervous and I stumbled along in my words, but I still got my brother and his wife to the point that really mattered. When I asked my brother, do you take Sarah to be your wife? Will you love her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, forsaking all others? Keep only unto her so long as you both shall live. And he said, I do. And I asked her the same question. And she said, I do. And they had been married for 20 years, faithful to each other through thick and thin. So I asked you, when does marriage begin? Marriage begins when the promise to be faithful unto death is given. That is the moment. Marriage is all about keeping this vow of faithfulness every moment of every day. Marriage is not primarily about emotion, love. It's not primarily about sex. It's not primarily about the practical fact of living together. Rather, it's this. Marriage is a promise made, a promise witnessed, a promise heard, remembered, and trusted. This is what makes a marriage. And so to you, may you be blessed in the making and keeping of your marriage vow. Thank you.